Hi, my name is Robert Hardy. I am the CEO and founder of the Ori Group. And today, thanks for popping along. I want to talk to you about a new product we've developed called CABIE, Customs and Borders Import Export. It's not a long presentation, this. It's certainly not one of our 3-hour epic webinars getting people ready for Brexit. But nonetheless, it is important. And I thought I would walk you through what are the fundamental aspects or the key aspects of CABIE and why we've created it and how it works and how quick and efficient it can be. So first of all, let's start with the basics. Trade, as we know, can be complex and costly to the extent that it's actually reduced the flow of trade between the UK and the EU and UK, simply because some people have avoided trading to a certain degree because of the complexity and the cost involved. We've said about doing something about that. It is complex, it is costly, but not if you have the know-how. And we like to think that we do have the know-how. So what's our mission in life? Our mission is to create the best customs and border solution, able to facilitate trade through integrated technology and cost-efficient process simplification. But what does that mean? Well, in essence, that means we want to actually cut through the complexity and cost, which are the barriers to trade in many cases, and certainly are limiting a certain amount of trade in other cases. Equally, we have long conversations with government officials on this and saying that the UK has a global trade policy and it can't be at the whim of the appetite of the customs intermediary sector. It needs to be far more sort of self-serving, hence CABIE again. So what have we done? Well, we created CABIE. We've created that because we want to take complexity and cost out of the process. And CABIE for us is customs and borders import export, but it's also quite synonymous because we often refer to our service as being the kind of customs equivalent of the knowledge that a London cab driver would normally have, where he, no matter what the traffic is, he can find his way from point A to point B within the complicated labyrinth of London. We can do the same in the customs process, so no matter what the conditions are, we can always find the quickest and shortest route from A to B, and hence the reason why we've created CABIE and why the name is actually just fits in quite perfectly for us. One of the things very clear to us is we don't talk about declarations, we talk about data. International trade, and particularly ro-ro trade, road roll on, roll off, European road haulage, it's all about data, and the speed of data has to be super quick. So a lot of what we talk about when we talk about CABIE is we try to get away from the declaration process and talk more about the movement of data, because that's key to everything. So CABIE is there, it's concentrated on data all the way along the line. It's super connected, as you would expect. So CABIE is sitting in the background, connected to all of the port systems, all of the inventory systems it needs to connect to. We ran a series recently on LinkedIn where we said we clear here, and we said we'd run the series until we kind of got bored telling you about all the places where we clear. Well, eventually we got bored, but I think we covered about 20 or 30 locations where we actually clear in Ireland and in the UK. So we are, as you would expect from any customs broker or customs intermediary, we are super connected to port systems, to government systems, to IPAFs, to traces. I think there's about 17 or 18 connections that we constantly have on a day-to-day basis. You don't need to be too worried about that, because that's what we do for a living. So we take care of all of those pieces. What we've tried to do is make the front end super simple, so that all the sort of back end can be taken care of by us. But from the user's experience point of view of how to use CABIE, it couldn't be easier, really. And we're going to take you through what those screens are. There are literally 9 clicks to customs clear something. You don't require a massive customs knowledge. This is not customs software. This is CABIE. This is how to get through customs and borders on an import-export basis. It is super connected, but we're not expecting, sorry, it is super simple, but we're not expecting you to do everything or learn everything or go on a training course for this. It's very intuitive. It works. It's pretty easy to use, and I'm going to talk you through it anyway. But also as an intermediary, we're here 24 hours a day. Our IT is here 24 hours a day, and our customs divisions are here 24 hours a day. So it's pretty much a self-serve process, but if you get stuck, no matter what time of day or night it is, during the weekend, during the week, we're always here. We're always just a phone call away. And if you get stuck with anything, we'll just talk you through it, or find a way around the problem. Remember the CABIE, remember the black cab, remember the knowledge. Okay. So where we started from, well, first of all, the complicated process that exists today, which, in a lot of cases it's been smoothed out, but not enough, if we're honest. We think it's pretty fragile. It relies on an awful lot of people doing the right thing in the right time. And in many cases, each party relies on the previous party having completed their task before they can take on or start theirs. So we don't like the way the process works at the moment. We think there's so many better ways of doing it. We think it's fragile. We think there's a lot of moving parts. It is complex. It can be costly. I also think it's outdated. The C88 customs document was created in 1988. That's where it got its name. I think really we need to move on from the C88 customs document. In many cases, the process can be unnecessary. It's an unnecessary complication or an unnecessary risk at the frontier. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, we can actually remove a lot of that risk and that sort of stress that can create, both for the trader and the logistics company. So if that's the starting point, how do we get to here? Excuse me. Well, one of the ways we get to here is by thinking differently. I'm going to say outside of the box because it's a bit overused, but genuinely thinking differently. So let's have a recap of what the starting point looks like. The traditional approach of a truck, and we're talking mostly here about EU to GB, but it's not only for EU to GB, but this is the sort of critical part at the moment. So if we talk about EU to GB movements, the traditional approach is that there is a truck. In that truck, there are, for example, 2 consignments. This consignment's fine, the import entry's done, everything's good to go before the vehicle arrives at Calais. And equally, this one's all done, good to go before the vehicle's arrived at Calais. But both those entry numbers by 2 different traders, 2 different intermediaries, self-serve, whatever the combination, they're both done, everything's covered. The import entry numbers have been passed to the logistics operator. He's been able to raise a GMR and the driver's good to go and he's happy. I also stuck my thumb up then, I don't quite know why, it's because the image is. Same truck, or his colleague, let's say, also 2 consignments. Again, was absolutely fine. This one, not so good. The intermediary is not contactable, or the trader's not contactable, or the importer's not sure that he is the importer, because it might be DDP, or it might be consignment stock. There is a complication. But there's still a truck rolling. Now, at that point, this one can't be finalized. This import declaration isn't done. The GMR can't be issued. That truck's blocked until the one with the red X is sorted out. So that driver's stuck. One at the top, fine. One at the bottom, not so good. What we also find in a lot of cases is the one at the bottom, quite often it also gets through the frontier, but there was no record of that consignment being added to the GMR. For example, the GMR is the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, which is the kind of port register of what's on that truck that allows the vehicle to board the ferry. The GMR doesn't know what's on the truck. It only knows what you tell it's on the truck. So with the top one, there were 2 consignments and the GMR was for 2 consignments and everything went okay. The bottom one, there are 2 consignments. The risk is that the GMR only has 1 consignment. The GMR is not clever enough to say, hey, what about the other one? And that vehicle could go through without those goods being properly declared at the frontier. So all in all, not good, not a good process, but it was dependent on the trader, the intermediary, his broker, however it worked, and it didn't work for one reason or another. In the dead of night, that truck can be stuck. Also on there, we've got 4 consignments. So we've got 2 consignments in the first truck and 2 consignments in the second truck, which means we've got around about £200 worth of customs documentation charges taken up by that process, which didn't work. Okay, so it doesn't mean that the customs charges are not payable because the broker is still doing what the broker's doing. There's a multitude of reasons as to why that process didn't work effectively, right the way down to the broker wasn't informed of the consignment being on its way, or was informed of the wrong port or whatever. But for one reason or another, it didn't work the way it was supposed to work, and yet it still incurred documentation charges overall of about £200. So what can we do about it? Well, CABIE does things completely differently. So if you look at that same truck with CABIE, in fact, same 2 trucks with CABIE, first of all, the GMR is almost a shoe-in. I'm going to talk you through how we raise the GMR in a moment, but there's pretty much no delay in raising the GMR because we're not dependent on multiple agencies to get that done. We're using custom simplifications. We have the top tier approval for custom simplifications, and that's exactly what we're using. So on these 2, the GMRs are good to go, the trucks are good to go, and we're back to the 4 consignments again. The only difference being is that's not how we treat it. That's not how CABIE looks at transactions, because again, we're not talking about declarations. We're not talking about frontier declarations. We're talking about goods on the move. So to us, or to the frontier, that looks like 4 consignments. To CABIE, that's actually 2 consignments. In which case, on the one on the left, we can just do 1 import return per 10-day period, and the same for the one on the right. So where you might see pallets or consignments, we just see data and data elements. So how come we can let everything through the frontier and only do a declaration maybe once a day, or maybe once every 10 days, but never more than 10 days, okay? The reason for that is that we have, as I say before, the top tier approval for customs CFSP, or as it's known as SCDP, a simplified customs declaration process. We've also got aggregation, 10-day aggregation approval, which means we can aggregate per day or per 10-day period, depending on the flow. Okay, so you can actually take 10 days worth of goods, and we would do 1 declaration. If we want to call it a declaration, we prefer to call it a return at the end of that 10-day period, which will cover everything from that consignor to that consignee. Okay, we do that because, as I say, we have that custom simplification, and this is about the strongest custom simplification approval you can have. So we got faster at the frontier, less paperwork and less cost. I mean, so what's not to like about that? I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day and saying, well, look, you know, we are a customs intermediary. Let us talk to you about being your customs intermediary. But there are customs intermediaries. Yeah, we've got to come up with something a bit different. Come up with something where, you know, nobody's going to change from one customs intermediary to another unless the original, you know, the incumbent customs intermediary does something wrong. And yeah, they're a professional bunch. They're not likely to do something wrong. So why would you move? Well, the only reason you move, or at least evaluate an option, is if that option is so different that it actually changes the way that you trade and the way that you handle your imports and exports. That's what CABIE is. So when we look at we were talking about there being too many moving parts, and it's a fairly flimsy, fragile process because there are so many parties involved. If you look at the traditional approach, there are 13 steps. Wasn't that a book? Which starts with the trader arranging the collection of the goods through to the export declaration, right the way through to the center piece here of 6, 7, 8, and 9, where the import entry is now required. The import entry is completed. The entry number is passed to the transporter, the haulier, and the haulier creates the GMR. That process can take between 2 and 4 hours because customs intermediaries have got a lot of work to do, and a 2-hour turnaround on a request for an import declaration is pretty good, to be fair. So that process can take around 2 to 4 hours. It can be quicker in some cases, but on average 2 to 4 hours. And then you have the GMR process after that. Now that's quite a weak link here, because what's happening is it also depends on the Incoterm of the goods. So if the goods are on a delivered basis, the exporter has paid for the transporter, and then but the transporter can't get to the destination because the importer's got to do something first at the frontier. Only the importer doesn't know who the transporter is. This is why we're saying it's all pretty flimsy, and there are a number of points where it can break. Also, because you're clearing at the frontier, this is on a full frontier declaration basis, the clearance can be delayed if there's an insufficient funds on the duty deferment account, the DDA account, which is being used to pay any duty or VAT, although why you wouldn't be using postponed VAT accounting is beyond me, but some people don't like to use postponed VAT accounting. Don't know why. So there are weak points within this. CABIE does things differently. So the same process with CABIE is only 9 steps from arranging the collection to the delivery of the goods. The reason for that, I mean, this is, and also the creating of the import declaration, if you want to use that word, in order to create the GMR, is we put it so there is a 10-minute process. It's actually about a 5-minute process, and we've actually got it down to a minute. We did a video recently of a complete walkthrough of it, and it took 1 minute. And I actually apologize for the video being so short, because it was that easy and that quick to actually create the import record. The reason why, I mean, the steps we take, there's 30% fewer steps in what we do. And the reason why there are 30% fewer steps prior to delivery is we do the admin after the event. We're not into the 175 days, which gave everybody the heebie-jeebies last year, where people were thinking that you had to take 175 days and got in a right muddle by having declarations all over the place. Ours is always we're either aggregating by a single day or by a 10-day block, And it's not a rolling 10-day block. The 10 days are set in stone. So we have imports from consignor to consignee for the 1st to the 10th, the 11th to the 20th, 21st to the end of the month. They're the set dates. So if you arrive on the 8th, you're going to do we're going to do the declaration on the 10th. If you arrive on the 11th, we can go right the way through to the 20th. Add anything in between. Okay, so we keep everything moving and we do the declaration after the event. So there are less steps in what we do. There's less people involved because there's less dependency to jump out and go to intermediaries, to importers, to brokers all over the place. There's less risk at the frontier because we're not doing full frontier declarations. We're quite alone in that. We handle, I think as a group, we handle about 3 million declarations a year. You can count on one hand the full frontier declarations that we do, because we just don't see the point of doing that way and stressing the frontier in that way. Look, I get it, is that you also don't want 175 days worth of declarations, but that was last year, and that's not the case anymore unless you're still importing, unless you're importing from Ireland, in which case there is still up to 175 days to do the declaration. So less risk at the frontier, less time needed, less paperwork, and generally less cost. Hard to argue that CABIE doesn't have a fairly compelling reason to at least evaluate it and try it. The fundamental element behind this is entry and declarants records. Now, last year there was the deferred entry scheme where you had this 175 days. Sorry, keep repeating myself, but you had 175 days to do the import declaration, and some people were correctly worried about that, saying we're going to get in a right pickle by the end of 175 days, so let's get everything done at the time. That's fine, because everything done at the time actually didn't influence or impact the supply chain as such, because it was just running concurrently, if you like, and it wasn't really impacting the frontier. This year, with the GMR process and requiring a GMR reference in order to board the ferry or board the train to come to the UK, then it's a bit more critical, and you've got to get it right. But the deferred entry scheme last year, which mustn't be confused with entry and declarants records, was very different in that the record keeper, i.e. the importer, and the CFSP approved person could be two different people. In most cases, it was the importer and, for example, us. So we were authorized to submit CFSP style declarations on behalf of an importer who wasn't in themselves authorized for CFSP. That was last year. This year is different. The authorized person and the record keeper have to be the same person. So that means either, in order to make use of the smoother process through the frontier, the importer either has to have CFSP EIDR approval, or the EIDR approved person, such as IORI, must have a record. Okay, so either the record keeper needs the approval or the approved person needs the record, which is the absolute essence of why we created CABIE. We are happy for qualified traders to use our approval, providing we have the record. So when we are looking at how do we get a vehicle through the frontier, we're not looking about how do we do a full frontier import declaration. We say, how do we satisfy ourselves that we will have a good enough record to do the declaration after the event, thereby letting the vehicle through, which is why we created CABIE. So CABIE is all about us being able to get a record in order to do the declaration tomorrow or the next day, and also to consolidate those into less declarations. Okay. It really is super simple. I think there are 9 steps. I'm going to test myself here. So step 1 is on the fast track process. CABIE can do everything that it needs to do. We use it ourselves. We have been using it for a year internally, but we're looking particularly here at the fast track EU GB flow, which is the bulk of the movements. About 75% of the goods that cross from EU to GB are non-controlled flows. So EU to GB is the first question: is it EU to GB? What are the origin of the goods? Is it EU origin, or are they mixed origins? What's the port of arrival? What are the goods, roughly? We don't need to know the commodity codes at this stage. We just need to know whether or not we're dealing with controlled goods or not controlled goods. So we just give you a pick list to confirm that your goods are not in this list. Okay. What's your job reference, so that we can refer that back to you whenever we need to? What's the ETA? Expected time of arrival at the port, shown in number 3. Now you can upload your documents. It will then give you a summary of what you've done, and you press submit. That's it. You're good to go. GMR can be issued off the back of that. And then what we do is take, for example, 10 days worth of CABIE submissions and create one consolidated import entry, which covers multiple GMRs and multiple transactions. So we can have a customs entry for 1 pallet. We can have a customs entry for 1,000 pallets, providing it fits the criteria for the aggregation over that 10-day period. Okay. So let's go through those steps. Step 1, and there aren't too many of these, so stick with it. Step 1, it's fast track for EU to GB non-controlled goods. It diverts to full fat CABIE if there are other types of movements like controlled goods or different routes. But let's go with the super slick fast track, which covers the bulk of movements anyway to GB, in the ro-ro market. So step 1 is simply asking you the question: is this an EU mainland to GB import? If it is, go to step 2. Step 2, are all of the goods EU preferential origin? Again, it's not a problem if they're not. We just need to be able to flag that they're not. If they are not EU preferential origin, there's a potential duty element to be considered within the eventual import entry. Therefore, we handle that depending on whether or not the trader has a duty deferment account or whether we're expected to be using our duty deferment account, and that can just slightly change the process. Okay, but step 2 is, are they EU origin? If they are, click away. What's the anticipated port of entry? That's for us to identify whether it's a GVMS port or an inventory link port. We can handle both, but it just allows us to actually handle it or process the job in a different way. Confirm the type of goods in the load from the list. A commodity code not required. We don't need to have any great custom skill at this point. We just actually need to know whether or not the goods are included on the controlled goods list. It's a simple tick box section. All of this is tick box, really, apart from this one I'm going to show you. Spoke too soon. We ask you to give us your job reference, so you give CABIE your unique reference number so that we can refer back to that at all stages. Into the expected date of arrival at the GB port you've identified. You can change that later on, but we'll use that date as the set date for the arrival of that import. So if you say it's going to arrive next Wednesday, it's going to arrive next Wednesday unless you tell us it's not going to arrive next Wednesday. Okay. Now you can upload your invoices relevant to the load. That can be multiple invoices from the same consignor. We prefer you to have one record per consignor, otherwise the consolidation gets very messy if we're also chopping between different consignors to go to the same consignee. So as much as possible, keep the single consignor into one declaration, but you can have multiple invoices from that one consignor, providing they all relate to that movement. Okay. We then give you a summary screen of this is what you've done. Just be happy that you've done it and you confirm and submit, and that's it. You're good to go. That's it. There was 9 steps there. You were just confirming that the goods were not controlled. You were confirming their EU origin. You were confirming that they're coming from EU to GB, the date, the port, upload the invoice, go. We are now sufficiently comfortable that we have a record that we will allow you to go forward against our entry and declarants records approval, because we're comfortable that we have the record. Okay, it's as simple as that. That gets you through the frontier. You then have a status screen that shows you all of the jobs that you've input, so you know where you are at any one time, and you can as I say, you can view the job, you can amend the date of arrival if you need to. But you'll see EPO coming up a lot. EPO was originally the Epiphany portal option, but it became the Express portal option, where we just said, how slick can we make this? But bearing in mind there's a big swathe of non-controlled GB imports from EU. And why are we complicating that process? How simple and fast can we make that so that and cost effective, so that if you want to ship daily, you can ship daily without incurring documentation charges every time you do. I've been in this job too long, really, but when you go back to when Europe required customs documentation for everything, this is pre-1993, groupage tended to be Tuesday and Friday because of the documentation processes were cumbersome, complex and costly. So you shipped more quantity less frequently. Of course, when all the borders came down, you shipped smaller quantities more frequently because it was basically a big domestic market. We're giving you back that choice. So this is very well accepted and supported by the groupage industry, because they want to keep things moving. The truck should just be able to flow. And this is as simple as upload an invoice. We scan it to make sure it is an invoice, it's not a picture of your cat, that we're happy with the content that's in there. This takes minutes. And then we allow you to go forward on our approval. If, for example, they are controlled goods, or if you're a repeat offender and you constantly putting through excise goods and telling us they're not, we turn off the express portal option, or we pass you into the full fat CABIE process, which is still slick and quick, but is not as slick and quick as the 9-click process. The GMR can now be created because we've given you the approval to use our entry and declarants records approval number. Some hauliers will still insist on a customs entry number. It's not required, and we've got a very clear screen then that tells them what to do and how to do it and how to complete a GMR. It's option 3 on the screen, so they're all stuck at option 1, saying it says here I need an entry number. And normally the conversation is look 2 down from that and you'll see all the EORI number of somebody EIDR approved, which is us. But you must have our authorization to use our EORI number. Okay, and that authorization comes from you submitting these documents. So you create the load, we create the record, we give you authorization to cross against our entry and declarants records approval. GMR can be done by us, but we also can handle inventory linking. Did that all the time last year. We do it again this year, and we have badges at all the significant UK arrival ports. If you want us to do the GMR, you literally just click on the box to say, yes, please take care of the GMR as well, particularly useful if it's a full load. We ask for a few bits of information like the vehicle number. Notice we haven't asked that at this point because we don't need it. So we ask for the vehicle number and whether or not it's driver accompanied. Boom, GMR's done because we use a direct interface into the government gateway to create the GMR quickly, and we've got the data that we need. So even if you wanted a GMR, the whole process was about 11 clicks. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why this is so successful is that we take the truck as being the trigger for the process, but not the process. So we remove the truck from the equation, get that through the frontier, and do the admin later on. And bearing in mind the admin later on is a customs declaration for now, when things will change over time, and there'll be more of a sort of periodic return. But right now it's a customs declaration. But when we're doing that customs declaration, we're not doing 1 for 1. We're not doing a declaration for every truck that we've seen for you and thinking, oh, there's 50 quid there, there's 30 quid here, there's whatever. We're taking 10 days worth of data and saying how few declarations can we do based on this 10 days worth of data. So what does this cost? Well, it depends on the flow of data within either a day or a 10-day period, depending on the aggregation that we're using. And we'll discuss this with you and be very open with you. It's not unusual for us to get to a groupage customs clearance price of £1 a pallet. Okay, that's £1 a pallet. So you can actually afford to if you want to, instead of shipping 25 pallets on a Friday, you can ship 5 pallets every day for 5 days of the week, and you'd still be paying the 25 quid. Okay, so it allows you the flexibility of deciding. We were always very conscious of this from the get-go, really, that the customs documentation charge has to have a relationship with the quantity being shipped. Otherwise, the quantity being shipped will always be as high as it can possibly be, so that the customs documentation charges and processing charges are diluted by the biggest number. We want to change the way that's done, because the customs clearance process for a container with 1 million BIC biros in it is the same as the customs process for a pallet of BIC biros. That can't be right. There has to be an easier way of doing it, and it has to be a case that you can actually then have a landed cost for your product regardless of the quantity shipped. Otherwise, you have a landed cost which is dependent on the quantity shipped, and that doesn't make any sense either. Makes it very hard for you to budget. Is it compliant? It doesn't sound like it's compliant, and there was always talk about last year the deferred entry scheme that wasn't compliant. This is our approval. Trust me, it's compliant, because we wouldn't have it unless we were compliant. We have this approval in the UK. We also have it in Northern Ireland. It's how we've been operating the Trader Support Service. Bearing in mind we're the background intermediary for that, is how we've been operating the Trader Support Service since day one. which incidentally was CDS from January 2021. So we're already very familiar with CDS. So the product that we're putting in place for GB imports is not only compliant, it's our approval. Okay, so the compliance that is at risk is our compliance, and we will not put that in any jeopardy. Hence the reason why we make sure the records are very secure. Okay, and as regards CDS, we are already CDS ready. We're just waiting for the switch over in the UK. Registration is free, so you can there's costs nothing to register on CABIE. There's no, you don't have to pay for any users. You don't have to do anything like that. It's a portal. It's not custom software. Okay, remember there's plenty of very good custom software packages out there. We use them. That's some of the connections we have at the back end. What we want to do is just make data really easy to use by actually saying we will allow you to go through the frontier using our approval, providing we have a record. And CABIE is just the way of creating the record so that the vehicle can move and we can do the rest later on. So the registration is quick and simple. We've got a full trader support team that will help you with that. If you get stuck anywhere, we can talk you through it. Does a lot of validation as you're registering. This is a one-time registration, but as you're putting in your VAT number, it's checking the HMRC VAT file, putting in your EORI number, it's checking the EORI files. So it's going to pull down information that is on the HMRC database. So, you know, sometimes you might see some differences. It's not our data. We're pulling it directly from the government official sources. OK, so if you see some data come back that you don't agree with, we've helped you identify that your VAT record is wrong and you need to change it. OK, so it's quick and simple. It's really about sort of 5 screens, I think. It's very secure. It also caters for if you have your own duty deferment account, it gives you the opportunity to record that you have your own duty deferment account. If you have your own CFSP approval, it will also allow you to record that, and we can handle the EIDR shipment still, but on your approval rather than our approval. That's fine. That's however you want to work that. This is one of its major pieces, is it also allows you as the parent, this is only for the trader. The logistics company can't have this access to CABIE. Only the trader can have this access to CABIE. We're not being awkward here, but we must have a record, and that record must come from the importer of the goods, not from somebody who they've asked to carry the goods. However, the importer can sub-authorize users within their organization and outside of their organization to provide the data on their behalf. So if, for example, you are a regular importer from France and you've got the same supplier, or you've got a bunch of suppliers, and you want them to upload the documents to CABIE each time they send some goods to you, you authorize them as a user. They're very limited access. They can only see the jobs that they create. You can see all of them, of course, but they just become a child of the parent. You are clearly the parent. So we can't accept an instruction from a logistics company or a supplier on your behalf unless you have already authorized them as a user on your CABIE account. Then they can pass the information to us all day long, because from our perspective, they are working on your behalf and with your approval. So we are always working with the importer because of that record is absolutely sacrosanct in this process. Okay, but there's a very strong point here, is that if you are loading, to educate your European suppliers, for example, you're saying to the supplier, every time you send something to me in the UK, go on to CABIE, this is your log on I've created for you, upload the invoices, answer the question 1, 2, 3, job done. The goods will be delivered with me 2 days later, and EORI will take care of the customs declaration 1 day or it's up to 10 days later, depending on how we agree the best way to minimize the number of documents in order to get the cost down to this magical £1 per pallet. So we've said here, let's just jump back. We've said here the CABIE registration cannot be for a logistics operator. Absolutely fine. However, we love logistics operators. It's why we exist. The Customs Clearance Consortium was built up in order to work closely with the logistics sector. It's my comfort zone is the logistics sector, but we must have the record directly with the trader because it's our approval that's at risk. So what we've done with CABIE is built it so that it can very easily create a white label version. So we can work with logistics companies and freight forwarders, or indeed other intermediaries, and allow our approvals still to be used, providing we're contracting or dealing direct, not contracting as such, but providing we're dealing directly with the importer, because we've got to make sure that the integrity of the record is strong. As I say, the importer can sub-authorize other people, but from our point of view, it's the importer we're dealing with. If that person or that company has decided to sub-authorize somebody else, that's their responsibility, not ours. Okay, so the logon is always at trader level, but we can provide a white label version for logistics providers. So it will look and feel like ABC Logistics. Apologies to ABC Logistics if you're on the line. It will look and feel like ABC Logistics, but actually the relationship in the back will always be the trader talking to Iori, so that we are not risking our approval by accepting data from our mind, an unconnected party. You know, that this, bear in mind, this started life as the deferred scheme where the importer had the record, the CFSP person had the approval. They must be the same, but they must be those two parties, either the approved party or the importer. Hence the reason why our relationship's always got to be with the trader. But the platform's built to expand. That's fine. It's all cloud based. We're on 3 different cloud sectors. The world would have to stop before we ran out of clouds. It's minimal cost involved to actually white label it. No liability, because we are the ones taking the risk and agreeing the release against our approval. It's a revenue opportunity for the logistics provider because they bring volume, and you get smoother frontier crossings because your process of obtaining a GMR, instead of hunting around potentially a multitude of customs agents in order, because the traders that, you know, they've all got different agents, for example, you're now just saying log on to CABIE, upload your documents, the GMR is done, everything crosses, and it's much smoother. So have we achieved what we set out to achieve? Yes, we have. CABIE was there to always take out complexity and cost by simplifying the process. So let's look at the key factors. Complexity reduced, cost definitely reduced because we can get down to this £1 a pallet. Border processes definitely reduced. This is how we handle all of our border processes. The paperwork definitely reduced because we can aggregate it into 1 day and up to 10 days. The risk reduced because there's more time. You're not under pressure because of the truck. The truck and the goods can be delivered, and the admin can be done after the event, but not to the extent where it's uncontrollable because it's 6 months after the event. It's literally maximum of 10 days. Is the process CDS ready? Absolutely, it's CDS ready. And is it compliant? Absolutely, it's fully compliant. Otherwise, we wouldn't risk our approval on the basis of that. So that's CABIE. Look, from our point of view, we've always said we can't. I mean, let's just unshare a minute. Hang on, so I come off that screen and come to me for a second. We've always said that we can't go into the market and say, this is what we've got to get. You've got to have one of these. We can't make you say yes, but we can make it pretty tough for you to say no by you can't kind of ignore CABIE without evaluating it and saying, well, is this suitable for me? Because can I get the goods through the frontier quicker? Can I reduce my cost? Can I take complexity out of the process? And can I get to a point where I'm not having to do so much at the front end because the record is being created by maybe my authorized logistics provider or my authorized supplier is creating the record that allows the goods to flow through, and then the process kicks in after the event without delaying the goods. As I say, it's based on non-controlled goods. If there are controlled goods or the goods of non-EU origin or blah blah or any combination, the worst that happens is you go into full fat CABIE, which is the full process of full customs controls. But that's fine. That's what we do today for 90% of the traffic we handle is controlled goods. Hence the reason why we wanted to sort of take everything that we've learned in that and strip away all the non-essentials so that we've got a super slick non-controlled goods process, and CABIE was born. So look, we're here. We're happy for you to try it. As I say, there's no cost involved with registering. There's no cost involved with exploring the possibilities of it, and there's no software to install or anything. It's a portal which not only allows you to upload documents, but it's got all of the approvals that keep things moving sitting underneath it. And if those documents are acceptable, the goods are free to go. So thank you for listening. Until next time, thank you very much. Goodbye.